I remembered that this life is not all there is. I remembered where I came from before I got here. And what they conveyed to me is that this life is not all there is. And in that knowingness, in that remembering, I had another layer of thank God. I knew I was going to be okay. This wasn't all there was. This life can't hurt you.
I'm happy to bring you Linda Deir. She arrived in this world unwanted, unloved, and abused. The first time she met her spirit guides and angels happened at 20 months old, just a baby, when her mother beat her unconscious and she had a near-death experience. Upon awakening, she asked out loud for someone to help her, and they physically appeared, an NDE in reverse. They followed her back here, telepathically communicating with her about her life, establishing a lifelong bond with them. Linda, thank you so much for joining me today. I am very blessed to have you, and this is going to be a unique experience for both myself and my viewers. You've got a little board here that you use to talk to your guides.
Yes, yes, I do. And this came along later. This came along in 1988. But I'll start with my story
Yeah,
from the
please tell us
beginning,
about your story.
beginning of my life. Yeah. The first thing I remember in this lifetime happened when I was 20 months old. That's the day I ran away from home. I was so tired of my mom beating me every day. What would happen? My dad would go to work 6 o'clock in the morning or something, and by 7 o'clock, the screaming would start. He was gone, and she'd come after me. My mom, I have a younger brother and an older brother, and I was the target of her rage. I don't know why. I was the only girl. Later in my life, I find out why that was, but at 20 months old, I had no idea what was going on. And I just needed to get away from her. So I went out the side yard, went up to the gate with that my dog. We had a German Shepherd, and he used to hit the gate until it would pop open and he'd run away. I watched him do it enough times. I said, "Oh, I know how to get that gate open." So I just hit it, several times, and it popped open, and out I went. And I made that right hand turn, and off to the interstate I went. And I got on the median of the freeway and just took off. I for some reason I knew where my dad was. I was going to find my dad so he would save me from her. So I off I went, and it wasn't too long. I was barefoot in diapers and a little baby snap-on shirt, and I mean, I was pretty raw. And the cops saw me and they picked me up, and when they put me in their squad car, they said, "Where are you going, little girl?" And I said, "I'm going to find my daddy. There's something wrong with my mommy." So they said, "Okay." They said, "Point out where you live," because I didn't know streets or anything, but I knew how to get back to my house. And I wasn't going to do it. I said, "No, I'm not going to go back there." So they took me to the candy store and bribed me with candy and broke my will. And at that point, I pointed out how to get back to my house. And now this was in 1954. So there was no child protective services in those days. It was a family matter. So they took me back, and my mom opened the door, and she was like, had the most shocked look on her face. She didn't even know I was gone. And and the cops, she had a conversation with these police officers, and, "Oh, thank you for bringing her back." My mom, her demeanor was totally different than the woman I knew, the mom that I knew, and to cover her tracks. And then the police officers were sure, when they were sure I was okay and everything was all right, they left, and my mom brought me inside and beat me unconscious. And I thought I was dead. I hoped I was dead. Now, that sounds terrible. That you, at 20 months old, I didn't want to be here anymore. This was not a good experience for me, and I wanted to be out of here. And unfortunately, I didn't spend much time on the other side before I woke up in a puddle of water, drenched. I guess my mother threw a bucket of water on me. That's a little on the crude side. And it snapped me out of it. And oh my God, when I woke up, I couldn't believe I was still here. I was I was in the worst shock and uh, torment of my life. Never in my life since then have I felt anything even close to that type of fear that I was back here. And in that moment, I asked out loud for someone to help me. And when that happened, this is my book. These guides, these light beings, these spirit guides and angels showed up all around me. And they calmly looked down at me. They were real tall and all lit up. And I instantly felt relieved. I knew that they were on my side. I remembered them. They started telepathically communicating with me. I mean, it was no more than 20 months earlier that I was there before I came into this life. All right. I understood everything they were telling me. It was it was amazing. They told me so many things, but one of the things that they conveyed was life will get better for me as I get older if I could make it through childhood. And in the instant that they conveyed that to me, I was relieved. I felt like I was going to be okay. And the next thing that came through that was an awareness. Now, I'm only 20 months old. This is all just coming back to me, okay? Because it was just 20 months before I wasn't here. I was still on the other side. I wasn't born. They didn't say this, but they conveyed it. I can't explain it. Telepathy is just a knowingness, all right? I remembered that this life is not all there is. I remembered where I came from before I got here. And what they conveyed to me is that this life is not all there is. And in that knowingness, in that remembering, I had another layer of thank God. I knew I was going to be okay. This wasn't all there was. This life can't hurt you. It can't hurt you. And so there was other things that they shared with me that it just went on and on and on. And what happened from this is when I found myself back here and they made this absolutely clear to me. They were calm. They were loving. They were the opposite of what I was experiencing in this life. I knew I'd be fine. I came out of that knowing me. That's another thing they showed me. I remembered who I was. It sounds crazy, but I knew who I was. I went away from that. I went away from that experience relieved and assured. And I was no longer in my whole life was I ever in that kind of fear in my life ever again. No matter what's happened in my life since then, I have never experienced fear ever again from that one experience. So what they basically did is they removed the amnesia just enough, like opening a door, just enough to get me back on track and to make this connection to them. And that was all I needed. From that point on, I could communicate with them whenever I wanted to. I could get answers to my problems. I would cry. I'd play in the sandbox and I'd cry and I'd talk to them and tell them my problems. And I'd have this conversation and this feedback, this communication that was going on all the time. I'd get my answers. I'd understand. I'd quit panicking. I'd quit feeling sorry for myself. I mean, as a little kid, you just I didn't have anyone I could talk to, anybody, because when my mom did this to me and I woke up, she said to me, she goes, if you ever tell your father what happened, the punishment will get much worse. And I was like, oh my God, I don't need that. So I would go out in the sandbox and play and talk to my guides, my friends, my best friends. My best friend, her spirit guides were her best friends and life coaches. And again, that's what they look like right there. Um, by the way, that photograph, I took that photograph, fast forward, in 1998, 1994, at Christmas time, when they showed up in the room and everyone was in the room. It was Christmas time, kids running around and everything. And I had that Nikon camera in my hand, and I seen them since I was a baby, so it wasn't a surprise to me. And I captured their photo, and then they dissipated. And I said to everyone in the room, I said, "Did you guys see that?" And they said the same thing they always say, "See what?" And I thought, well, maybe I did make that up. I mean, I'm open to being wrong. And then when I got back from the trip and I had the film developed, there it was right on the top of the stack of pictures. Film days, 1994, not like today, where you can just, oh, they're with me all the time since that happened. Probably would have been with me all this time. Had that not happened when I was 20 months old, I just wouldn't have been aware of it. But having that experience when I was 20 months old was the worst day of my life and the best day of my life because of that. So, so as I move through my life, these guides keep coming through. They keep coming through. I go out of body on command anytime I want to. My family would be sitting in the living room, and I would be sitting in a chair in the back, and I would go out of my body as it was sitting there in the chair, and I'd watch everybody walk past me and go in the kitchen and go to the bathroom, and and there was no difference. I mean, it looked like I was just sitting there when I was really up at the ceiling watching all of them and traveling around the ceiling of the house, going where I wanted to, hearing everything that's going on and exploring this whole out of body experience thing. I didn't know that was what it was called then. I just did it, you know? And then I did it all the time. One time I was laying in my bed, and in those days, in the 50s, there was this little snap gun. You put a dart in it, and it had a rubber end on it. And our ceilings in those days was smooth. We didn't have that cottage cheese ceiling. I don't think that came into play until, I don't know, probably the 60s or 70s. And I'd lick the end of the dart, get it nice and wet, and I'd lay in bed and I'd shoot the dart on the ceiling. And I'd shoot as many darts on the ceiling as I could before they started to fall back down on top of me, because they dry and they fall back down. Do you know what I'm talking about with
Uh,
those little
I'm not
darts?
sure. I don't
You
remember the
didn't.
little
You're
darts.
you're too young for that. But in the 50s, that was a pretty fun toy that we all had. And I got annoyed by the darts falling back down on top of me once they would dry. So what I did is I'd lick a bunch of them, I'd shoot them up to the ceiling, and then I'd go out of my body and pull them off before they could fall back down on top of me. And then one time I was doing it, and I went, where am I? And I looked back down on the bed, and there my body was. And I go, oh. And then I said to myself, how can I be in these two places at the same time? In that moment that I thought the thought, and I slammed back down into my body, and my head was like, oh, I had this massive headache from that experience. So I took a nap. I went right to sleep. And in my sleep, the guides told me, they said, you can do that as much as you want to. Just don't question why you are in two places at the same time. And then I could do it as many times. This thing with the out of body experiences, I did it all the time. I mean, I did it where I don't know if this is really an out of body experience, but my near death experience turned into these multiple out of body experiences that went on and on and on. And out of body experiences are just like um, near death experiences, the same feeling, the same sensation, the same freedom from your physical form, where you can do anything. Okay. I would fly. I would go out of the house. I would move outside of the boundaries of this roof of the house. and I would go flying. I mean, for distances. And the one thing I was always concerned about when I did it, I was totally cool with doing this. But the one thing that always freaked me out was running into the power lines. I was always concerned about hitting them. And I thought, well, maybe I'm flying too low. So I'd fly higher, but then, they have the great big power lines that go up really high. And I would always, in the back of my mind, I was always cautious about those power lines. So symbolically, what that means is running into something more powerful than me. Okay. In other words, I was out of my league, I guess you'd say. You know, I was going maybe farther and doing more than maybe I should have been before I got myself tangled up in a mess, power lines tangled up, electrocuted, all that kind of thing. Too much energy. I'm also a dream interpreter, so I think about the symbolism associated with really with anything in your life, and that would symbolize that. So running into something as I move beyond the beyond, that I could run into something that could actually harm me. So I became more, I was more cautious, and so these are out of body experiences. I mean, throughout my entire life, even to this day, I have them. And I believe that it started with that 20-month-old toddler experiencing this whole thing where I didn't see boundaries. I didn't, I don't know. It's not like I didn't respect boundaries because I was careful about the power lines, but I didn't feel bound. I didn't feel restricted. I didn't feel fearful. I was cautious, but I wasn't afraid. So and fast forward again, my life, when I got out of the house when I was 16 years old, uh because I got pregnant on purpose. I tried so many times to run away. I sleepwalked all the time, walked right past my parents in the living room, out the front door in the middle of the night, like 11:30, and they'd go, "Get back in here. Where are you going?" And I just keep walking. They knew I was sleepwalking. I was always trying to get away from that family that was abusive toward me and bullies, and it was bad. And so for me, out of body, I was probably just trying to go home. That's what I think. I mean, this place, this world, it was bad for me as my mom tormented me nonstop throughout my life. So at 16, I got pregnant on purpose. Um, and I got out of the house the first night I got out of the house. I wet the bed until I was 16 years old. I couldn't stop it. I would set the alarm. I would set it hour after hour so I wouldn't have that problem, and I'd still do it. And when I looked that up, what the meaning symbolically of wetting the bed is fear of the dominant parent. So that's why I couldn't stop. The first night I was out of the house, because I was not wanted after I got pregnant. That was a real sin, okay, to do. And the first night I was out of the house, once they finally let me go. I wanted out, and that was my price for getting out. I never had that problem again. How does that happen? Now that's some serious trauma, childhood trauma. That the only way I could get away from it was to, would you call it running away? It kind of was. I mean, I got pregnant. I started running away at 20 months old to get out of there. So this to even to me was shocking. I was like, wow, that didn't take anything. My mom said to me, she goes, "Are you going to tell the guy that I was going to marry, that I was about to marry because I was pregnant and we were going to get married?" She goes, "Did you tell him about your problem?" And I said, "No, I don't have that problem anymore." And there it just slipped out, right? That's guidance coming through. And It was a week later, I was out of the house and away from her. And I really didn't have that problem anymore. How about that? So this kind of thing with the guides, with the guidance, with with where we come from, we have that help with us throughout our lives. We don't just come here and get dropped off to this family that may or may not be worthy of you and to fend for yourself. And oh my God, you're all here, but you're here all by yourself. And that's the end of it. No, far from it. Far from it. You have, they follow you here, your guides. You plan this life with them. And I learned this. Thank God I learned this so young. Honestly, I wouldn't have made it through childhood. Like the guide said, life will get better for you as you get older if you can make it through childhood. It was only because of them, the guides, that I made it through my childhood. And then, 16 years old, by the time I was 19 years old, my guides come to me and they tell me, your marriage isn't going to work out. You need to find your own way. Now, they just come through. They just telepathically, like when I was 20 months old, just come through and tell me these things. And I said, well, oh my God. I mean, you get married, you think it's going to last forever. You're still young, you're naive, and I'm like, oh man. And so what they did, my husband was he was a apprentice carpenter. And I told him, I said, I want to start designing homes and I want to build them. He goes, what? I said, I need to meet the architect that does the drawings on the plans that you guys build these houses from. He goes, okay. I had no education. Where was I coming from? Who did I think I was? All right. Again, no fear. Just I didn't think of myself as having limitations. I never did. So he takes me to this guy. His name was Dave Williams. And I meet him and I show him designs I drew on napkins. I brought him in and he looked at him and he looked at my husband and then he looked at me. He goes, I don't have time to work with you. I don't have time to teach you. And I said, okay. And that was it. I said, it was really nice to meet you. I appreciate you meeting with me. And then it was no more. I started designing these homes. We had our first home when we were 19 years old. We did the sweat equity to paint it and to frame it. He was in the framing business, and that was his apprenticeship in framing. And he framed the house with all of his comrades. He came out and framed the house, and then I painted the house by myself. And 19 years old, we moved into that house. I was 19 and he was 20. We had our first brand new home. All right. Imagine that. Again, I was married to somebody who felt kind of like I did, like, hey, there's no limits. Let's just do this, So he was a free spirit and me too. So that was our first home. And after we were done with that one, we immediately, right after that one, within a year, went out and bought another house with the same builder and did the same sweat equity. I painted it. He, had his friends come out and help us frame it. And that was our down payment. And then the other home, we rented it out until we got moved in and everything. And I said to my husband, I said, I want to sell the first house and buy a lot I found and build this house that I drew on a napkin. And I want you to introduce me to that architect again. He goes, okay. We were young. There was no limits. Okay. We were perfect for each other at that time in our lives. All right. Now, in the meantime, while I was doing all this, I didn't know that he started taking drugs. He said to me, he goes, I don't know where you have all this energy, Linda, but I don't. And he goes, I'm envious of you. I can't keep up with you. So he started taking, I don't know, some kind of they called them bennies, or they were hot, they were uppers. Yeah, and he started doing. I didn't know he was doing this, but he seemed to be able to stay up with me just fine. I mean, this is a crazy story, but I didn't need any of that. I was on fire. I was so happy to be out of that family childhood I came from, to have this life I had. Oh my God. We had our own home. Now we had our second home, and I was going to build this spec house. And I got to do this. Wow. And I had absolutely no education for any of it. So sold that house, got the money, bought the lot, paid cash for it. At this point, I was like 21 and had the house designed, went to the architect, and he said, okay, I'm going to put you, he goes, you will not quit pestering me. He goes, go in this office. It's one of the offices he had in his building. Go over here, and here's all the stuff you're going to need to draw it. He goes, I'll keep tabs on you. I'll help you through it. And he goes, and go ahead and draw what you designed. Okay, let's see if you can even do that. Well, I had the lot. I was ready to build a house. I was already there. Okay. Anyway, I got through that. He helped me design my first house, draw it myself, figure it out. He became he was my, instead of going to a formal Cal Poly, I lived in California or something like that. I didn't have the money. I had a kid. I had no business going off and running somewhere to college for 4 years. I didn't have time for it. So once I learned to do that first house, then uh, I went about getting the subs together to figure out how much this house was going to cost to build, so I could go out and get my construction loan. Construction loan. Okay. Okay. I looked like a kid. I was a kid. And I knew I couldn't walk in a bank and get a loan. I mean, we got loans on our houses, but that was our family home. All right. So I thought, well, this is a business now. How in the heck am I going to get this loan? So I ran across this guy. Um, he was like a shark. He was in between the bank and the person who's getting the loan. And he charged me money like a shark would, quite a bit of money, to represent me to get my first construction loan. And I got it. Okay, now I was ready to go. I had all the bids together. I had, everything ready to go. Now all I had to do was hire the subs. I had no idea what came first. Okay. What came after the first thing and the second thing and the third. I was like with blinders on. I hope I can get through this. I asked my husband, he was just a framing contractor. I said, at that point, he was a framing contractor. He had his own license. And I said, how do I schedule all this? He goes, I don't know. He goes, you're a big shot builder now. You figure it out. I mean, this is crazy. I said, okay, I will. And so I stumbled, I hired the subs. They had no respect for me. I mean, I was younger than their kids. The subs I hired, okay, they were like laughing at me. And I was a woman. There were no women in the business in the early 70s. All right. So I stumbled through it and got through it. It was horrible. I did get the house built, completely finished it. We moved into it because I wanted to live in these houses to see how I would make the next ones different. Okay. That's how I learned from it. And that's for lack of a formal education. This is how I educated myself. And I went ahead and I finished that house. We moved in. And so I sold the house we moved out of, and I went out and bought 3 more lots. And that time I had one under my belt. The subs, they learned how to work with me. They saw that I paid my bills on time, all this. And now I was building 3 of them all at once. They said, well, now that we're not going to treat you like we did the first time, because we want the work. Okay. So I had a little bit more respect going for me. I got my own construction loans because I had one successful project behind me, got them, and I sold all of them in the frame stage. I went, this is working real good. So I finished those houses up, got them done, went out and bought 5 more lots and built those houses, started building them. And it just goes, it cascaded. And I built a subdivision and developed land and built custom homes. And I mean, I was just on fire. Well, the whole time all this was going on, my life was, I was raising a kid. I had a husband that was beginning to lose it. I noticed he was having problems and he wasn't acting right. What was really going on, and I didn't know he was ever taking drugs, but it was beginning to hurt him, beginning to have negative effects on his personality. And so I was spinning all these plates, you know, and building all these projects and these houses, and I also on his framing jobs, he did like 1,000 unit apartment complexes where he was a contractor for all the framing of it and all. I was the one that handled all the contracts with the general contractors. I solidified the deals. I don't know, again, Tia, I don't know where I got all this knowledge. I think I came in with it, and the guidance that was behind me, moving me through this. Anytime I needed to figure something out, I would ask other people, but nobody could help me. No one could figure it out. I was ahead of them all. I mean, they were either a framing contractor, a foundation contractor, some kind of a subcontractor, but they didn't understand what it was like to be a builder. And I wasn't going to go to another builder. They'd laugh at me, okay? Because who do you think you are playing in our sandbox? You shouldn't be doing this. You're a woman. Get out of here, that kind of thing. So I had to figure it out on my own, which really happened quickly. I mean, I did stumble a few times, but I always figured out how to get through it and out of it and work it out, which made me so durable. I could figure anything out. So as we were moving through this, and my life just started moving so fast, I would go out on his jobs. That's what I was going to say. On his jobs, and the every one of the frames had to be inspected by the city to make sure that they met code. So my job, on top of all the jobs I already had, raising a kid and all my projects and subdivisions and everything I was doing, I'd have to go out to his job and do I called them the frame pickups, where I'd go through and I had an eye. Oh God, I could see, I knew everything that was wrong. And I'd have a framing crew with me, maybe 3 or 4 guys, and they would follow me and I'd go, that needs to be fixed, do that right there. And they'd be getting it done just like this, just like this. And we just blow through the frames. And I do like 20 of them at a time, just blow right through them. And I had a pickup crew that was amazing. Okay, these guys were hot shots. And I learned the whole business. I mean, I knew it from the ground up. And so I on top of all that, I was doing that. Then one day, because I was so overdone, so over obligated, I hovered out of my car. I was way up, looking at myself driving in the rat race. Again, I'd go out of body and see what I was doing from a detached perspective, and saw how I was living this life like this. And it really took me back. And I was like, what am I doing? I mean, I was making a lot of money, but what am I doing? What's the point? It made me sit back. These moments where if you're out of your body, if you move out of your body, if you have a dream, like a lucid dream, which I've had so many of those, it's asking you to take a look at what you're doing. It's giving you the opportunity, it's giving you the other perspective. That's what I want to call it. Because as soon as I was out of my body, shot out, and I was watching myself drive along with everyone else in this rat race, I knew something was changing. It was a signal, a sign. I could feel it. And it was probably another year and a half later that they came to me and said, real estate's going to crash. Sell everything you have and sell everything out in the future. I had subdivisions I was developing to build homes on. And I mean, if you're a builder, you're out 2-3 years ahead. Uh, so you have land and developed lots to build homes on and stuff like that. And at this point, I was about 24. And I was really burning out. Oh my God, I was so tired. And I did. I finished building out my projects, and I didn't have my eyes set on anything else. I didn't buy any more land. I didn't buy any more lots. I didn't yet nothing. I just finished everything I had and sold everything. I sold my rental units. I sold everything. I sold everything that I had. And within 3 months of the real estate market crashing, I was completely out of the market. People were coming to me saying, before this happened, they said, what are you doing next, Linda? What's coming next? I'd go, there's going to be a real estate crash. I'm selling everything. They said, what? The real estate market, Tia, in those days was white hot. Even I went, really? We're going to have a real estate crash? And they said, yes, my guides. And I said, okay, I'm never going to argue with my guides. I'll tell you, after what they got me through in my childhood and my life, I was never going to doubt them. I said, okay, that's it. I don't even think twice. I'm on it. So it took me about 18 months to get out from underneath everything. So, and I go to the builder convention, and they'd go, why are you selling everything, Linda? And I said, because there's going to be a crash. And they laughed at me, and with their big cigars, great big guys, and blew smoke in my face and laughed at me. I said, you guys, I go, do you think the success all came from you? They said, oh yeah. I'm so-and-so. And I said, well, I got news for you. You just hit it at the right time. You got lucky. All right. You followed something that told you it was time to do that. You have guidance just like I do. You followed something that's greater than you. And now you just don't know when to quit. You don't know how to, move out of harm's way and get out of the way. And they said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just a kid. And every single one of them got wiped out. They lost their Ferraris, their fake marriages, their big houses. I mean, they lost everything. And it was ridiculous, how they thought about themselves, how quick it goes to their heads. I'll tell you one thing about this guidance. When you have this connection to these guides, when you really have it, when you really learn how to make this connection and write it down, you see, that's another thing I did besides my book Guided. This is the book I wrote. The guides told me in 1994 when they showed up, and I took their photograph, and I took that photograph. They come to me in a dream a couple of weeks later and said, you're going to write a best-selling book about your relationship with us since you were a little girl. And we appeared so the world could believe it. Now, I didn't write and publish the book until 20 years later, because quite frankly, I wasn't a writer. I never thought about writing a book or being an author or any. This is how guidance works. So what? I wasn't a builder either, and wasn't formally educated for it. So what? The guides don't think about you as limited. They see you as unlimited. I mean, there's nothing you can't do if you believe in yourself. Okay? I'm going to take that one step further. If you know who you are. At 20 months old, I walked away from that situation, crawled away from that situation, understanding who I was. What they showed me, what they allowed me to see, where they broke through that amnesia and let me see what that was before I got here. Never feared anything again. I mean, you've got to be kidding. All the things I did, anybody that didn't have this connection would have been scared to death to do the things I did. And I didn't have any fear. There was nothing I felt I couldn't do. And I was right. It wasn't reckless because I had these guides with me. I had them guiding me all the way along. Once you have this connection, once you've been on the other side and experienced them, which I'm still getting to, other uh, other instances where I was literally physically right there on the other side and I was not coming back here. And they I'll get to that in a minute. That's a bunch of other things. This just doesn't stop. What, in other words, what I'm trying to say, once you have this connection, it doesn't stop. And that's why I I wrote the companion journal to Guided, so that there's a place for you to write down when that guidance comes through for you, and then ask yourself how it made you feel. And when you really answer how it made you feel, like the many things I've explained here, how it made me feel, what I felt, you have an instant realization. And that there's no work in that. It's just something it drops in your head. You know, you feel it. And with that, the action is the last part of this. The action that you take is obvious to you. You just know. I knew I was going to build these houses. I knew I would write this book. I knew I'd create this project. I knew so many things. I knew when they came to me and asked me to create this talking board. That's another thing that happened when I took their photograph in 1994. In 1988, 6 years before, my dream teacher, I was going to dream classes because of the dream I had for the first 35 years of my life that wouldn't stop, that I call the merry-go-round dream, that showed me so many things. It's chapter 1 of Guided, about this life and what I was in for. It showed me so many things from that first encounter with my guides. Chapter 1 talks all about that first encounter with them and how come this came about. Okay. It's just a whole rapid series of things that happened. 1988, in that first channeling session with my dream teacher, invites me over. This is so interesting. I've been going to these dream classes for about 2 or 3 years. Really advanced me. Oh my God, I needed that so badly to understand that dream I had for the first 35 years of my life every single night, that I couldn't stop or change. I needed to understand that dream. She invites me over to her house, and we were not chummy. I mean, I didn't really like her as a person, but she was a fabulous dream teacher. I got what I needed from that situation. And she had me over and she brought out the Ouija board because that's the only thing that existed then. What happened is the only reason she invited me over with her and her friend, they did this together, was because their guide said, we want you to have Linda in on a channeling session. And they said, okay. And they forgot all about it. So a couple of weeks later, their guides come back through, them talking on their Ouija board. We need you to have Linda over for a session. And they said, yeah, we'll get to that. So they come to them again and they say, you will no longer have access to us until you have Linda over for a session. How about that? And they had me over reluctantly, had me over. And all they did, they grabbed a pad of paper, gave it to me, tossed a pen at me and said, just start writing. And they started channeling my guides. This is on the channeledreadings.com website, the story of Ask the Universal Channel. The whole story's there. And they came through and told me about the earthquake that was about ready to hit Oakland and San Francisco in 1989. And they said they at that point they didn't say it was going to happen in 89. They said it's going to happen soon. And they told me it's all in the story, in the story about how this came about. Told me all kinds of different things about me leaving California, how I was going to move, and all the things that I was going to do. They even told me my husband at that time was there at the channeling session. They said your marriage isn't going to work out. Okay, here we go again, right? Here's the second one. And he literally could not stay in the session. He laid down on the floor and went to sleep. I, I mean, it's all so powerful and it's available to us all the time. That wasn't a bad thing. Now, here's the thing. I thought, you know, they said, leave him behind. Go to Arizona or go. They said, told me that I'd moved to, they suggested I go to Colorado, but they said, you'll move to a neighboring state instead, which is exactly what I did. I didn't want to go to Colorado. I moved to Arizona. And it is a connected state. And they said, leave him behind. And I went, what? Leave him behind? That's not nice. I can't leave him behind, And I didn't leave him behind. I said, okay, some things, some things you do with your guides, but what you decide not to do, you won't know the price until later on. And I'll tell you what that was. Everything was fine with us. There was no problem with us. Everything was fine. So and I'll catch that story in a minute, but I want to finish the thought here. That's when they asked me to create this in that first session I ever had, channeling session. They said, we need a talking board that doesn't cause fear and caution. We need it to help people move through the uncertain times to come, that things were going to get rough. And I said, it's the only thing they ever asked me to do. And I said, totally, I'm totally in on this. I'm happy to do it. I was an architect at that point. I mean, I learned all that. I learned to be an architect from my tutelage with Dave Williams, that architect. And so I had the skill to do it. And this is literally hand drawn. Okay. So I went ahead and designed it based on the dreams I was having, where I was designing it, and then they would look at what I had, then they'd answer, how they want things a little bit different in the dream. And I'd go back to the drawing board and refine it. And it was a co-created project between them and me until I was done with it and had it done. Amazing. I mean, again, so let me get back to my thoughts on this, where I was going to explain something to you. I should have a little notepad where I don't lose my train of thought because there's so many things that happen along the way. So anyway, I had the talking board designed, and the one thing they told me that I needed to do is to teach people how to use it. Just don't make it and then throw it out there like the Ouija board, where everybody's just reckless with the use of it. They said you must create instructions on how to use this. And I literally teach people in group settings where I'm physically there, in classrooms. And I have a online 4-week course that they can get that teaches them how to do this the right way. Okay. Because I am the world's foremost authority on the correct use of the talking board. I have never had a bad experience using it, nor has anyone I've taught ever had a bad experience using it. So anyway, moving on, I developed the talking board and moved out of Sacramento. Oh, I know what it is. Moved to Arizona. And my husband, that they told me to leave behind, became a different person. He changed totally. I don't know how come he did that, but he became the biggest jerk. I mean, I could not believe what he turned into. He turned against me. He started drinking. He just went off the edge. I went, whoa. And then I remembered them telling me to leave him behind. I went, okay. I so when we moved out to Arizona, I made this my project. I started teaching people. It was already done, produced and packaged and ready to go. And I started teaching people. I put on workshops. We moved to Sedona, Arizona, and I drove down to Phoenix to teach the workshops. And it was going really well. I mean, everybody, I filled the classes. They were learning how to do it. And what was really interesting about it is everybody in the class, and this is going to sound so strange, but they literally fell in love with me. And I know that sounds completely weird, but they really did. They would just sit there and look at me. And I mean, they were captivated. They were feeling the love energy that was coming through. That while I was teaching this, from the guides, from their guides, and I would have to tell them, I go, it's not me that you love. It's you that you're learning to understand and learn about. It's you that love is coming from to you. This is your connection to your guides. This isn't me. I'm not the personification of that love. You have that love. This is in you that this is coming from. You're just focused on me. You're used to love being somewhere outside of you when it's right here. Okay. So these classes were so powerful. And I mean, to this day, that same energy hits where they misinterpret it and they think it's me. And I have to remind them that this is love energy that's coming through you, from you, to you, with your guides. So that was something I didn't expect. I mean, I've just had this connection, this love, this bond, this communication bridge. I never, until I started teaching other people about this, I didn't really realize just how much of this I had going for me in that regard, the love. So anyway, my husband was completely off the rails. He was just making no sense at all and became my enemy. I did this teaching class in Phoenix, and I had this experience where I went out in the swimming pool, took a few laps, and got out and laid down sat on the grass, and all of a sudden, my body started vibrating, like vibrating, and I was like, "Whoa!" So I laid down on the grass, and my body was literally bouncing off the grass. I was looking around hoping nobody would see this. Okay. I knew something was going on. I knew I was teaching the class. The guides were really, really focused on me. And so I knew something was underway. And I just went with it. The guides were talking to me. They said they were talking to me from up here. And they were coming. They explained, I said, what's going on? Telepathically, I was communicating with them. I said, what's going on? They said, we're raising your energy. We're on a platform. We're coming from a platform and we're sending you our energy and we're ramping up your energy. And they said, are you okay? And I said, yes. And I just really breathed and I really breathed into it because I could feel my whole body. My teeth were chattering. I mean, this was really intense energy. And all of a sudden, I was transported, in my mind. I was transported into a cave where my feet were in the body of water in this cave. They were sitting in the body of water. I was in an electric dress, form-fitting dress, all the way from my neck, all the way down to my feet. And my head was in the lap of an Native American Indian man. As this was all going on, as this energy was moving through me. And I was okay then. I was breathing okay, but man, was I vibrating. And then when I came out of it, they were working on me. They were raising my energy. And I came out of it. I literally had to crawl back to my room. I was staying there at the hotel. Crawl. I couldn't walk. I had to crawl back to my room, and I just crawled into bed and just fell asleep. I woke up the next morning feeling great. I mean, I remembered the whole thing and drove back to Sedona. I walked through the front door, and my husband at that time, the one that was, took one look at me and said, "I'm losing you," and started crying. I never said anything to him. That was interesting. This connection with these guides is such a it's such, I mean, it's just going to speak for myself. It's such a part of my life. I mean, I can't even imagine my life without it. 20 months old, this is all I've ever known. And they've shown me and they pointed me in a certain direction. This isn't going to, they don't always tell me things I want to hear. Leave him behind. Your marriage won't work out twice. Okay. I mean, just so many things. Real estate, sell everything. Real estate's going to crash. I mean, I was on fire. I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars every year in the 70s before I was 25. And real estate's going to crash. Really? You mean the party's over? I mean, but I knew better than to argue with that. It would have crushed me if I hadn't listened to that. So, and I mean, right down to getting pregnant on purpose to get out of there. I'm pretty sure I was guided to do that just to get the heck out, because that was literally killing me, that family. And to be ready to take all this on by the time I was 19, I had to get out of there. I couldn't wait until I was 18. I had work to do. I didn't even realize the impulse was to get out. So then I started having these experiences. I mean, throughout my life, I've had these experiences where I was having lucid dreams in my dream class. They were teaching us to have, how to handle a lucid dream, how to initiate one. And I was right there. I knew how to have those lucid dreams. And I was in one of those lucid dreams, and they would, before this, I'd have lucid dream night after night after night after night, where they were teaching me how to fly, because I was always concerned about hitting those wires. And they teach me how to hover above the ground, maybe a few inches, and hold it. Do you know how hard that is?
It sounds pretty hard.
What's hard about it, when you're about to go out of your body, you don't just kind of go out of your body. You go out of your body. You just go. They taught me how to not do that. They taught me controlled flying. Go up a few inches and hold it. It's like, I'm going to say something that might sound a little bit weird. It's like just before you climax, hold it. I don't know a better way to describe it that people could understand. Not yet. And but I would do it, and I would hold it there. Then they'd go, come back down. Now, come back up again. And I come up a little higher, hold it. And they taught me this night after night, week after week, on how to manage my energy, not just fly. I mean, they taught me this. I was so good at this. And then in lucid dreaming, one time I got on the other side, and the teacher was teaching us whenever you have a lucid dream, you can ask anything and get the answer just like that. And it's always the truth. Okay. You can do anything you want when you have a lucid dream. And I'm like, yeah, I got that. So I was in this lucid dream, and I'm on the other side, and the guides are teaching me. They're teaching me not this one, but they're teaching me other things. Night after night, I'd pick up the next night from the night before the lessons they were teaching me in my dreams. And I was in this one dream where they were teaching me night after night, and I was in this dream, and I was lucid, And they said, okay, it's time for you to go back now. And I said, I'm not going back. And they don't argue with you. They just looked at me. I mean, it was ridiculous for me to think I had any power over that. And before I knew it, bam, I was back here. I'm going, oh my God. I didn't want to come back. What? Yeah, I was so disappointed that I didn't have a choice. That teacher was wrong. And when I came back that time, I am not a depressed person. I have never, I haven't had a life of depression. I know a lot of people who have, and it's horrible. And I know it's real. But this is the one time in my life I went into depression. I went into depression for 2 months. I did not want to be here. Now, my life's working out really good. I mean, I've had so many successes, and that was so much better than being here. So I was like, oh God. And I couldn't tell anybody. I was married to that idiot. I mean, that guy that they told me to leave behind. I couldn't talk to him. I couldn't tell him anything. You know, he didn't care. And I don't even know what to say. In those months where I was depressed, the guides didn't come through for me at all. I stepped out of bounds. So I needed to experience what it was like not to have guidance, not to be able to access them like this. That was interesting. So I understood. And from that experience, what I understood is what it's like for other people who don't have this connection to their guides and what it must feel like. It was not good. I've had the best life, Tia, because of this connection I have, where I can speak with them on command, where I have access to them all the time, where I know how to interpret, I know how to connect with them just randomly, just all the time. Dreams, all of it. I have a very charmed life in that regard. So I know how this works. That's why this is my work. This is my whole life. Because I have experienced it in every possible way. And I really do know how to help people make that connection to their own guides. Mostly, they like this. They like this, but they master this first. When they writing, okay, writing in your journal. This is the same process, by the way, I followed when I was a child. Because I couldn't talk to anybody about what I have experienced in my life, and I had everyone working against me, I started journal writing when I was 7 years old to figure it all out. I had all this amazing guidance, these amazing experiences where I knew what someone was going to say before they said it. I could make someone say something when they didn't even expect to say it. I was able to manifest. It was amazing. I learned this by writing in my journal. Of course, this didn't come out until 2018, but this is the formula that I followed, that I learned from my guides. And from doing this journal writing, I always knew what to do and when to do it. I could trust myself. And I never showed anything I wrote to anybody. So I teach people how to use this. I teach them how to use this. In fact, I've got a page on my website. That's the journal entry page. That's an online page where they can just type it all out and keep their journal entries in order for free. And a video at the top that teaches them how to do it, how I teach them to do it. The more advanced level, and it's called, after a while, after writing in your journal, and you do it every day for 15 minutes a day. I do it at night, and every day for 15 minutes a day. And you write down what was unusual and out of the ordinary that day, what you would normally have just gone, oh, that was interesting, but what good does it do me? You won't know it until you write it down. And then when you write it down and you start to review what you wrote day after day after day, you start seeing how it's all tied together. It becomes like your storyboard. You go, whoa, I see. And you start seeing patterns like, am I doing that? And things that you don't want to do anymore. That I don't want to be doing that. I want to fix that. And you start to see patterns, and this is how, and then after a while, after you keep doing this, what'll happen is you'll start to see things that you wrote down that you do not remember writing in there. That's automatic writing. That's where your guides are coming through, infiltrating your writing when you didn't notice it until you reviewed it a day later, a week later, a month later, and go, wow, that I don't even talk like that. Okay. And then you start to spot it. That comes first. And then comes this, where you can actually automatic writing, and then where you can actually start to communicate with them like this. This is a more advanced level of talking with your guides. And I actually have, this was designed and optimized for not just for the use, not just with the speller, the planchette, but also for use with the pendulum, where you can use a pendulum at the circumference is tight enough where it's easy for them to spell using the pendulum. And I mean, it really moves fast. Once you start getting, some people use the pendulum. I'd say probably, I'd say 75% of the people start using this, Ask the Universal channel, using the pendulum. Okay, center, and they'll stop as soon as this is the energy coming through, not me moving it. This is them. And usually people will start out with yes and no questions just to see how the pendulum will move or the speller will move. But this is contact with your guides. And when you do the writing in your journal, the connection is established here with your guides. So when you start to use this, the connection is already there. You don't have to worry about some other energy coming through. And never have I had a bad experience using this talking board, nor has anyone that I've ever taught. Because I start them with the journal. I start them with this. So their head is in the right place. Their connection is already built. So this becomes more possible for them to do. Let's let them say something. We will always watch you write in your journal. We are there. Vibration goes up when you have this communication with us. And that is why you will be better at this. And that's why you will be better at this when you are proficient at your writing. You could ask a question right now if you have a question about what I've talked about today, and they will answer you.
Do we all have guides that watch over us and help us?
Tia, you have 5. They are your primary guides that answer your concerns when you think of them. A At any time, you can ask them a question and they will answer. But you must write down your question first, or you won't connect with our answer. Now your guides are talking. It went from, okay, did you catch that?
Yeah.
Okay, you won't connect with our answer when it arrives. So here's what you do. And by the way, you can just go to my website. I'll give you instructions on how to get to it. All you do is, and this is the format for the online version of this page. All right. All you do is you write down your question, you date it. Whatever you do, don't forget to date your journal entries. Absolutely, you have to do it. And you write down your question. What was my question? Okay. What was my question? First, I'm going to write the date down. Then I'm going to write out the question completely thought out. I need an answer to blah, and I'm going to write the whole thing out. Okay, now that I wrote it down and I dated it, close it. Now you can either wait for the answer to come through, and that's what I recommend. Use the journal to start with. Wait for the answer to come through. It will come through. Okay. And even if you need to bring it back to the front of mind, you open your journal back up and look at what you wrote. And think to yourself, at that point, you might go, oh, they sent it to me yesterday. I missed it. I didn't remember that I didn't catch it until I saw what I wrote down, which was the question. I didn't see what it is you're not used to making the connection. You're used to going through your life so fast, like us all, and you ask the question, but you forgot you even asked the question. So when the answer came through, you don't even, it's just another bunch of life going on and you miss it. So this is why it's important that you write the question down first. Write it down longhand. I mean, like the whole thought. And I don't mean write on my website. I'm going to show you where to go, where you can type it, and you can just keep it in your, you can print it out and put it in your binder and keep them in chronological order, so that you can refer back and flip through and go, oh my God, I see the whole picture now. I remember, even as you're doing this, you'll go, oh, now I remember when they sent me the answer and I completely skipped over it. I missed it, but I didn't miss it because I just remembered it. Now I'm going to type it back in because I remember what they told me. Then you answer the part where you go, now that I have the answer to my question, how does that make me feel? How does that whole thing make me feel? And once you really, really flush out how it made you feel, a lot of people will say things like, oh, it made me feel good, or it made me feel bad. That's not an answer. An answer to that question, most people are shut down. They've shut their feelings down. It's hard to believe, but they have. Mm-hmm. And it happened when we were little tiny kids. And, people didn't have time for us, stop talking like that. We don't have time. Don't quit asking me questions. They had no time for us. So this is the only way I figured it out, is doing my journal writing when I was starting from 7 years old and empowering myself with this connection I have to my guides and my understanding of myself. There's no better way to understand yourself than to do journal writing. Absolutely no better way.
And when we get an answer, we write it in our journal, or should we practice automatic writing?
What you do, where you wrote your question down. I'm going to show you the page to go to. You're going to love this. Where you wrote the question down. Once you get the answer, you write it right underneath the question you asked. Right underneath it. This is my question. And then when you get the answer, this was the answer. And then you write it down.
How do we know if it's our voice or our guides?
Oh, you'll know. Oh, here's how you really know. This is the ultimate test. This was what makes the journal so good. You write down the answer, and you're right. A lot of times, because we're so used to kidding ourselves, let's put it that way. We don't know if it's us or if it's them, is really the question here, right? Okay. What you do is you wrote the question down, and then you got what you thought was the answer. Now, did that answer come from them? Did it come through you? Or did it come from you? You don't want it coming from you because that's just more of the same, right?
Right.
You want it coming through you because you know that didn't come from you. All right. Write that down. Now, you close your journal up. Now that you asked the question and you wrote down the answer, the reply, and you look back at what you wrote a week from now, as soon as you look at what the answer was, what the feedback was from your guides, you'll know right away if it was you or if it was them. Because you know bullshit when you see it.
Mm.
Right? You know it.
Yeah.
Okay. And you especially know your own BS. So when you see it, you'll go, well, that didn't come from me. I know that didn't come. But there'll be times when you look at it and go, that was wishful thinking. I totally interfered with that. And that totally came from me. I don't want those kind of answers. Come on. And from that, it will strengthen your ability to be open instead of dominating it. That's how you'll know. Here's another way you're going to know. This is oh, when you get a reply that you didn't want to your question, that totally didn't come from you. But write it down. You have to write it down. You have to write it all down. That's how you're going to make this connection to your guides bulletproof.
I love that you were able to take a very bad situation as just a baby, and you and your guides turned it into a charmed life. Like you said, you lived a beautiful,
Oh,
wonderful, charmed life. That is a miracle in itself. And it all started with this near death experience.
here's what it did, Tia. In the opening, when you said it's like a near-death experience in reverse, reverse engineered the near-death experience, because what happened, I wound up on the other side so relieved to be out of this world that was tormenting me, my mother, my family, only to find myself back here probably once she threw water on me. All right. That probably snapped me. I don't know. I was unconscious. I don't know. I'm assuming that's what it was. It seems the most logical thing. And I come back into this life. And I mean, I was in my whole life, I've never had an experience like that felt that raw, that hopeless, that dark. And when I asked out loud, here's another key. There's another part to to my guided journey. I've got to bring up right now. Part 2. Part 3 is the journal writing. Okay. That's 20 pages in the back of this book. But part 2, part 1 is read or listen to guided. I also did guided in audiobook format. And by the way, I'll send you guided if you want it. You let me know.
Yeah, I love it.
You let me know what format you want it in, and I'll get it to you. Okay, and I read the book myself if you want the audio. In chapter 2, there's 18 chapters. The first chapter is fear. Fear is the first thing that shut us down in this life, just like it shut me down. And the next thing that happened in my life, as soon as the fear hit, the second chapter is ask. You have to ask. You're not going to remember to ask because you're not used to doing it. It's almost like something we were taught not to do. It's not okay to ask. Where did that come from? How did we learn that? We need to unlearn that. Okay. So the first thing we have to recognize is the fear, that first fear in our life that shut us down. And the next one is asking. You've got to learn to ask. Asking is critical. What I did when I went into fear, I mean, ridiculous fear. The next thing I did, my only hope, my only option was ask. I asked out loud for someone to help me. And that's when they all showed up. These light beings, these guides, these angels. And they stood up, they were standing up, like hovering above the floor. It light and just calmly looking down at me in that on all fours in a puddle of water, communicating with me telepathically. It's that easy. But now that you're a grown up, it's not going to be quite that easy. So you have to ask here. So when you're done doing your journal writing, let's say you do a month of journal writing in part 3. It's called my journal writing. You just do the journal entries, just the journal entries every day for 15 minutes, just the journal entries. What was unusual and out of the ordinary today? Write it down. What came through? What do you need an answer to? Write it down. Write it down. Okay. Don't worry about getting the answer. Just write down what you need, what you're asking, what you need an answer to. When you write down what was unusual, out of the ordinary, maybe you didn't have anything to ask that day, but you write down what you still don't understand about what happened that day, right? It's kind of like an ask. You go back to part 2, and once you've done enough journal writing in part 2, you start to dig into where you're getting hung up. And there's 18 chapters. Fear, ask, friends. I'm not talking about friends in this world. To the most part, people don't know how to be friends in this world. It's all conditional. Your friends, your spirit guides, are unconditional. Okay. And you move through all this, friends, and I'll move down to chapter 9. Chapter 9, crossroads. All of us hit a crossroads at some point. You're going to know in your journal entries exactly which one you need to focus in on. Separation. When did you start feeling separate from everybody? Even if you're with them, you still don't feel that connection. You don't feel like you can really trust them or yourself. Compromise. Do you compromise in your life to be in a relationship, to have a job, to live where you're living? Anything that has to do with compromise, where you have agreed to lower your standards to be in it. And this gets into just a couple, 2.5 pages, me talking to you about what that is. So you can begin to backtrack, retrace your life, reverse engineer your life after all the evidence you have in your journal entries to go, I see where I compromise. And in part 2, in this part where I talk about it, it shows you how to get out of it. And there's a place for you to write down exactly how you have compromised. It's another journal entry on that particular chapter. And then the fear returns. Okay. So you might have gotten over some fears. You've gotten through some of them, but then it returned. Fear is stubborn. Fear will return. And what is it? What did you do when the fear returned? You had fear 5 years ago. Now you had it come back again where it debilitated you. What was that? Write that down, because the only way we're going to recover from these traumas is to be able to look back at what we wrote.
Linda, this has been amazing, and thank you for all the things that you do for everyone to try to help them heal. You've been through some huge traumas, and I know it stems from you not wanting others to have to suffer as well. So
That
I
is so
appreciate
true.
you. I
Yeah, that
appreciate you.
I'm going to bring up that journal page just so people can, and you can.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, please do.
If you go to, you'll see my name right there, Linda Deir, lindadeir.com. And on the top of every page and post of my website is the guided journey. It took me 8 years to build this. It's a co-creation with me and my guides. When you go to the guided journey, you go there and it's going to give you a toggle, professional life or personal life. You click on either side and it'll bring up a whole menu of options for you to take your journey on the guided journey to start getting answers, getting digging into what's holding you back, what's been hanging you up and holding you back. When you see that, when you go on every one of these is formatted with three bullets at the top that give you an overview of what that particular post is about. Underneath it is a video of me talking to you about that particular post, what it means and how to play it out. Under that is the guidance. All the italics in the post in each one of these is the channeled information that I used using this to explain what that's about from the guide's perspective. Underneath that is the call to action. And right next to it, it says, start your self-examination. Under that is the final part where I end it with how it works. But click on start your self-examination on every post. And there's probably 500 of them on the guided journey. Click on that. It'll take you to the page where you can start doing your journal entries, Tia. Okay. And to all of your viewers, the guided journey took me 8 years to build, and it's free to everyone. I even have an email from a professor at one of the universities that told me he sends his students to the guided journey. They use it.
Well, I can't wait to check it out. And thank you for making that and making it a free resource for people.
Yeah, you're
And
welcome.
I will link your website down below in the video description for anyone who wants to find that. They can just easily click there.
And I also do coaching sessions with people and training on how to do this one-on-one over the internet, like we're doing right here, but private with each person, where they can communicate with their guides. Like we had that little bit that we did,
Yeah.
but they
Wonderful.
have a whole session with their guides.
Well, thank you, Linda, so much.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure, Tia.
The pleasure's been mine. It was a great honor. Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.